the contemporary camp, that's where these people are. Instead of moving forward, they're going backwards. Because they're not using the knowledge from old camp. Because you always have to go back to old camp when confusion happens.
And is old camp in that situation pre-colonialization, pre-contact?
No,
No?
no. Old camp is 1,000 years old, before Europeans. What governed them? Where did they take their teachings from? Where did they learn these things from? To live in harmony within that camp.
Natural laws.
There you go, part of it. But it was the elders, the knowledge keepers that had those resources at that time, old camp. So they became the library of that camp, putting in Western words in there. But they were the knowledge keepers. They were the ones who had the resources to keep that camp flowing freely and openly. So everyone in that old camp had responsibilities. They had roles and responsibilities, both men, women, and children. Now, if we move to the contemporary camp, we're now at a place where, for us as Indigenous people, they're not going back and using that knowledge that was passed on. They're putting their own stuff into it. And it's starting to create not only cultural confusion, but confusion within their agencies and organizations because, okay, where do we go from? Yeah, it's good to have all kinds of money, but where are we going? So they go back. It's going back. And they're not going back to go and harvest that knowledge. They're going back to, oh, I'm Indigenous. I can speak. Yeah, you can go back to be Indigenous, but you're not going back and harvesting that knowledge. You're going back to bring confusion. And that's a bigger picture of it all. It's not, if we were just to look at Miskanawa, Miskanawa has Wakutuin, but it also has the concepts of old camp, new camp, and so on. It's there. It's just that those people that have those responsibilities are not going back to the elder and say, look, this is where we're at. What do we do? How do we move forward? And then that elder will go back and say, okay, we need to go back. What governed us? What was said and what was done at that old camp in order for us to bring those resources forward so that we can continue moving forward, because old camp is a living knowledge. So, but it evolves. And in contemporary camp, it evolved with Indian Act, all these laws, okay? Western way of doing things in the contemporary way. So if they want to move to future camp, they got to teach those people within the contemporary camp and teach them, and look, we need to bring that elder to come in and teach us these things. What governed us? That's why we're all over the place. It's sad, but that's just the way it is for those people. So when you go back to old camp, where everybody had a responsibility, everybody lived in harmony, everybody had a role and responsibility. We had elders there that knew how to build drums, that knew how to tell stories, and so on. They all had these little roles that they passed on that knowledge to the younger generation, the younger people. And then these young people, when they got stuck with something, they went back to old camp to revisit what was taught in order for them to refresh their memories, to refresh the reset button, so to speak.
So it's not a static process.
No, it's not.
You go back and forth.
Yeah, you can always go back to old camp. It's always available. Always, that's every day. So it keeps everybody in line. It keeps everybody in harmony so that you can start looking at the future camp while you're living in a present camp. But this contemporary camp is interfering. They think they're above. They assume they're above because it's a government. These are the guys that are trickling down the monies and stuff. Yeah. So they're confusing the present camp with the knowledge that was harvested from old camp. And in order for that to be, to fix it, go back to old camp. What's confusing us here today? To remember, when we're harvesting knowledge from old camp, where everything was in harmony, all the resources supported each other, however way, but they supported each other in order for them to move to the present camp. Now, in the old camp, the elders looked at, do we have enough resources to start looking at moving the camp? So before the elders moved camp, they had to look at the resources in the future. Is there enough animals? Is there enough wood? Is there enough water? How are we going to be protected by the elements? Is there enough land? Those are the resources. Now, if you parallel that to the Western, do the people have enough knowledge to carry those things into the future? Policy, procedure, paralleling both systems. Now contemporary people step in. They bring in their documents and, okay, this is what you got to follow. Because we're being told that this. Already, it confuses that harmony from the old camp. People start getting, it starts to trickle down. People start getting confused. Now there's no harmony. So, if that happens, whoever is the leader needs to go back to the old camp. How did we handle this? How did we take care of this? Is what's happening now. What did we do? How did we resolve some of those issues? Because it's a living document, because it's living, it's a spirit. And if you don't feed it what it requires, the resources, then it's going to stop. Then that's when people start putting in their own stuff into it. Then it confuses the whole process. Then it just becomes a dysfunctional camp. Alcohol, drugs, violence, everything starts to happen. Because in old camp we never had that. We never had people steal from each other. We never had people lie to each other. People supported each other. Core values of the old camp. Bringing it into the future. Honesty, integrity from different agencies, different people. Speaking the truth. Then you can start looking at future camp. And only then until this is resolved. This is where you, even for Miskano, this is where we can use our Wakutun ways. Because it's the same thing. Old Wakutun teachings, present Wakutun teachings, future Wakutun teachings. it will never die if we protect it. Not only from policy and procedure or, the smudge and the ceremonies and all that. It takes more than that. It takes the whole camp. There could be 20 of us here working and just doing a beautiful job. Then Tara walks in. And she says, oh. You got to follow this document. Already there's confusion. Because she didn't go through the process. She would have to go to the leader, the camp leader, and say, look, I have something here, I need it addressed. We need to look at this. How do we do this? The leader will say, well, you know what, I need to call in our elders so that we can look at it. And however way it looks, it can be resolved because it's a Wahkotun document. Then it's fixed because we have resources to fix it, to make it work. But if you just dive into it and start being the boss, which you aren't, because we're trying to work in harmony and we're trying to work in a safe environment, and only then it will work. That's why a lot of agencies don't understand that concept of moving forward. It's always like they're always trying to go back. Well, what worked 10 years ago? Well, it's not going to work today, but they go back because it worked 10 years ago or 5 years ago. It's not going to work today because it doesn't have the resources to help it move forward. The key to that is bringing that knowledge from the old Wahkotun camp and bringing it forward, because that's what governs everything. And only then, if Wahkotun says it's okay, then we start looking at future camp. And only then. But sometimes you got to weed out those people that are putting on the brakes or creating chaos and confusion within the camp. Yeah. Yeah.
That's what you're saying.
That's what I'm saying. It's the real thing. Yeah. Pipe was lifted.
That's the supervisor.
Yeah. He's the ultimate. In other words, that he's the creator, the grandfather and the grandmother. Let's use Wahkotun. Let's use Miskanoa, for instance. Somebody had a dream. Somebody had an idea. That one idea at old camp decided to do something different. And for some reason, that individual decided to go to the smudge, to the fire, to the teachings, to the pipe, to the cloth. He or she decided to speak to an elder. And that idea grew because the elder validated that person's dream. And says, okay, grandson, here, I give you the resources to create that. And with those resources, this young individual started harvesting resources around for the camp to grow. And it started to grow. But what governed, and he or she knew what governed them, was the pipe, was those values of that old camp, based on the pipe, the Wahkotun teachings, those real deep values that only sometimes only indigenous people can grasp at, right? But we bring that and we try to parallel it today. But it started with a dream, one dream, to start Miskanoa. And look at where it's at today. How many camps did it go through? Yeah. And it's still growing. But it went through many camps because the resources ran out. Couldn't function in there, couldn't work in there, not enough to feed the people. We ran out of buffalo meat, we ran out of moose meat, we ran out of water, we ran out of wood. So let's find a new camp. So this young individual gathered resources and created another camp. Now you look at Miskanoa today. Are we running out of resources? Are we storing enough resources? Are we functioning within that space to keep harmony within the camp? Or are we just passing the buck? Or are we just functioning? Or are we just living? Sooner or later, that wood is going to burn out. Do we have enough wood to keep it going? What's going to happen? That is so important to keep and continue harvesting that knowledge or those resources to keep that fire going, the Miskanoa fire. But in the meantime, that person that doesn't understand that part, because it was a dream, a camp, 4 or 5 camps, we are now looking at future camp. I feel that. I know it. I know Miskanoa is looking for a future camp because we're growing so fast and we are facing challenges not only from contemporary people, but also the ones that were giving us resources. They're asking questions now. That's where you go to the old camp, and bring that knowledge back up. To say, okay, you know what? That's not going back. You're not going back. Because it belongs to you. Then you create that conversation. You must learn, because it's a living spirit, because it's a living document. You need to keep feeding it. You need to keep revising stuff. Yeah. Things don't work that were there 10 years ago, or even 5 years ago. They don't work today. Yeah. But it's knowledge. It's knowledge. We can say, well, you know what, we ran through that. We had an issue like that about 5 years ago, and this is how we resolve it. So how do we do and use that knowledge today? Or do we just make something new? And create something new. If you're going to create something new, you need to have resources to create something new. Yeah. If you don't, then you're going backwards. I like Miskanoa's old camp, at how it started. We had young men there that didn't know how to chop wood or even gather resources or even go tell them to go chop a dry tree down. They didn't know what a dry tree looked like. until we had that elder teach those young men how to cut wood, how to chop wood, how to make a fire. That's old Miskanoa camp. Yeah. Then it grew. Today, we're at a present camp. We have resources now to keep not only the cultural part of it alive, but we're also feeding our families that are culturally hungry, spiritually hungry for this way. We have the resources to keep those ones alive, to keep them going. Yeah. So the future camp now is starting to look so much better. They say, well, you know what, Miskano has a lodge and they have elders there. They're pretty cool. I want to go back there. Those are resources. If you pull in one of the guys or one of the ladies from inside there and talk to them about this, where did it start for you? They'll share that story with you. And it started with Miskanoa. Because we fed them what they needed. And it was honesty, integrity, safety. And they loved it. Not physically, but spiritually. But it's hard for those people that are contemporary thinkers for them to grasp what we're talking about. Yeah. They need to sit in. We need to bring those people in and have them sit in one of these conversations. Yeah. So they can ask questions. Because we're looking at, if we look at future camp, we already know. Now we move to future camp. Okay, we have the resources and the capacity to live with future camp. Now things are going to change. Things are shifting, always shifting. Things are always evolving. But because Miskanoa's future camp is governed by the old camp, we can absorb that because we now have the resources and the knowledge to amend stuff or whatever that needs to be done because it's living. It has life. Yeah. When Kirby first put down his cloth and offered his tobacco and to step away from mainstream Western way of dealing with indigenous families and children. And that elder stepped in and said, there you go. Because already that elder knew about old camp, yeah, and its values and how it was, how it grew with resources. And when I talk about resources, it's not only knowledge, it's resources, and people are resources. Yeah. So if you have enough people, it starts to grow, and gets bigger and bigger. Yeah. That's why. And then along the way, part of the Wakutu and Old Camp was to recruit alliances along the way, so that we can help grow with each other. And that's why when we look at United Way is part of our camp. Because we're also supplying resources to them so they can keep growing. So they, in return, they're supplying resources for us to keep going. And that's part of the old Wakutuan camp, the old way of harvesting resources and knowledge so that we can keep moving forward. And I think that's what Tara was talking about, not realizing that they are part of it. Not only United Way, but the different agencies that we work with, right? Yeah. But even this, look, the vision. It is common to the Western and the indigenous representations of the new camp principles. So there is a new camp that's going to evolve under different principles, but still connected to the old. Okay, you bring this to the elders, or you bring this to the chief of the new camp. Then the chief will call in the elder or elders and say, what does new camp principles mean? It's a Western word. So the elder will interpret principles. What are the principles of a camp? Yeah. It's just a different way, a Western way of saying it. Yeah. But I would call it new camp resources. Yeah. Then you have reconciliation, the path for healing for indigenous people, and then that's what we're doing. But you need to look at, if you want to start creating a future camp, you need to look at a strategy of developing a new camp. You need to have somebody in there that continues harvesting that new knowledge. Those principles they talk about, yeah. So our existing camp is now. But before we start moving into new camp, there's contemporary people that don't understand. So that's where that strategy comes into play. So we teach them. So in order for us to get to new camp, we must start where we are. So in the existing camp, we are also operating under a Western system. And then we must learn about the old camp, our indigenous systems, our old ways, and moving them up to the future, to the new camp. But the old ways and the old values and the old teachings cannot change. We cannot fix those because they're written in stone. You can't fix a smudge, or you can't fix that fire. You can't start tweaking stuff. That's where contemporary people are starting to tweak stuff. That's why it's creating confusion. I think that's very important, that we need to inform them. Those contemporary people are so stuck in Western way of thinking and Western way of doing things. They need to look at, okay, where did we come from? How was this born? Where did it started off as an idea, and then it just created ethical space within the indigenous person and the Western way of doing things. Yeah. Then he started asking for funding. Yeah. And the Western was, oh yeah, he was obligated to, to fund some projects. But under their rule. Now, back in the day, there was no such thing as paralleling systems. It was hard for the Western to understand that indigenous elder wanted it to help to parallel those two systems to help support that indigenous family. Because Western way of doing things have little or no idea what that family's been through, or, but the indigenous old camp knows what to do, knows what's needed for that family, which is important. That's what we do. And it's pretty cool. So, and even here when I was learning and then I was thinking about writing down new stuff about old camp and stuff, You know, there was a communication of rules of engagements. Elders always provided the guidance. They were always there. There was never no confusion because of that communication. And not only that, old camp, old Wakotuan camp, set out rules and responsibilities for everybody. So when they started moving into the present camp, they carried some of that knowledge and brought it to the present camp, and it grew. It just blossomed because of that connection we have with our oral teachings. But we also knew that it had a spirit, that we had to feed it in order for us to continue moving forward. Yeah. And that's why we created an alliance with different agencies, different organizations. Then you look at United Way. They are our relations. So we need to keep that relationship going. They support us, we support them. So it works both ways. Yeah. And they understand that. They understand that part, that relationship part. Because every time we sit around, Mishkanoa comes up. And I sit there and I say, oh, okay. But they will always ask, how do you guys do that? And I said, well, we do it. We go back and harvest whatever knowledge that's missing today so it can help us move forward. Yeah. Teamwork, collaboration. Collective consciousness is reinforced. It doesn't only become you. It becomes everybody. Yeah. So everybody has to follow the Wakutuan rules and responsibilities. But that's how it works. That's how all Miskanoa works. Because it was family. And that elder that gave those resources to Kirby to continue to do what he's doing today, he's seen that. It wasn't an individual. It wasn't only one. It was a collective, and that collective was Kirby's family. And he's seen those indigenous families, those indigenous youth that needed a voice. That's why it's important for Miskanoa to look at it that way. We are a family.